Hello, friends. Today, we have a fascinating tale about the Eiffel Tower during World War II. Once upon a time, when the Germans took over France, something interesting happened at this famous tower. You see, the French government wanted to make it a little tricky for the German leader to put a flag on the top of the tower. The Eiffel Tower, built in 1889, was quite a masterpiece, and it played a big role in history. When the Germans invaded Poland, France decided to stand up and declared war on Germany in 1939. However, something surprising happened. It took only 6 weeks, starting on May 10, 1940, for Germany to defeat France and take over Paris, the capital. But the French weren't giving up so easily. When the German soldiers arrived, the brave French resistance fighters had a plan. They decided to destroy the cables of the tower's elevators. Why did they do this, you ask? Well, it's because they didn't want the German leader and their army to have an easy time climbing the 324-meter-tall tower. Now, here's a question for you. Do you think what these French soldiers did was for the greater good, or was it just a small but positive thing? Imagine if Paris had been captured right away, and a flag was raised at the top of the Eiffel Tower. What do you think about that? Let us know in the comments down below. Here is the another story. Once upon a time, I had an interesting experience while waiting in the car. You know how sometimes people can be a bit strange? Well, this was one of those moments. I was waiting for my wife outside a women's clothing store. After about 10 minutes, I noticed a man in another car. But he wasn't just glancing at me, he was staring, and it felt a bit strange. So I decided to do something a little funny. I waved at him. You know, a friendly wave. And guess what? He waved back. But here's the funny part. Even after I waved back at him, he still kept staring at me. Can you believe that? Now remember, we were right outside a women's clothing store, so I had a feeling his girlfriend or wife might come back to their car soon. I decided to play a little game and waited patiently while staring back at him. This guy was acting really weird, let me tell you. Finally, the moment I was waiting for arrived, his girlfriend or wife got back into their car. Oh, by the way, their car windows were open. So, I did something to make them laugh. I walked up to their car and pointed right at the man, and I said something loudly. I told him, I'm flattered, but I am not gay. Then I turned around, walked back to my car, and continued waiting for my wife. Now here's a question for you. When you're waiting for someone, and there are people right outside the store's entrance, is it okay for them to keep looking in your direction? Is it fair game for them because they're standing right in front of the store's entrance? I'd love to know what you think about this. Another interesting story for you here. A long time ago, about 30 years ago to be exact, there was a story about a music store and a guy named Jake. Jake and I were buddies, and we liked to hang out after work. We had so much fun and shared lots of laughs. Jake was a talented lead guitar player, and I thought he would be a perfect fit for my band. The other band members liked him too, and we all got along really well. We even played some gigs together and got a chance to perform at a new place. This place, however, had a rule. They would only hire bands with 4 to 5 members. Our band used to be a 3-piece band, so we needed to add someone new. You know what the owner of the place thought? He believed that 3-piece bands sounded a bit cheap and empty. Well, this place wasn't the fanciest, but it paid well, and it was another spot for us to play and add to our list of gigs. The big gig night came, but guess what? Jake didn't show up on time to help us set up. We were supposed to start playing at 9:30 p.m., but Jake was nowhere to be found. That's when the trouble began. Our manager was furious with me, thinking we had lied about being a 4-piece band. He said some pretty angry things. He told me, I'm not going to fire you, but you'll never play here again for pulling this BS. I tried my best to explain that it wasn't planned, and we didn't have cell phones back in 1989, so we had no way to contact Jake. To be honest, I started worrying about Jake. It was so unlike him to be late like this. Finally, after we had played 2 sets, Jake showed up at 11:15 p.m., alive and well. But he had a surprising story to tell us. He had been with a girl he met, and he thought she was more important than the gig. Our bandmates were furious with Jake for making us look bad in front of the manager. The manager realized that we were telling the truth about being a four-piece band, but he still told us we could never play there again because of the unprofessionalism Jake had shown. After that gig, two of my bandmates insisted that I fire Jake. I was pretty mad too, but I really liked Jake, so I tried to convince the others to give him another chance. I talked to Jake at work on the following Monday. He didn't want much to do with me after that, and he was quite bitter about it. It was a tough situation because we had really hit it off as friends, and I missed him. But that's not the end of the story. A couple of months later, I got a surprising call. It was from my boss, and he asked me to come to his office. He told me that he had received many complaints about me. People were saying that I wasn't working well, and some even thought I might be stealing things. I was shocked because I was well-liked and did my job really well. My boss hinted that it was Jake who had made these complaints about me. Now, Jake was in good standing with the boss. I told my boss that none of those complaints were true, and I explained the situation with the band as a possible reason for Jake's actions. But it didn't seem to matter. I was fired from my job. 2 weeks later, I received another call. It was to come back to work because everyone in the store had realized that they had fired the wrong person. They believed it was Jake who should have been fired because he lied about me and behaved badly. I went back to work, but there was a twist. I was given a new job, the one Jake had wanted. The good thing was that I wouldn't have to work with him in the store anymore. I did that new job for 10 months, and then I decided to go back to school in September. But there were still 2 months left before I could leave. I mentioned my plan to the store manager, and it seems that Jake overheard it. The very next day, my boss fired me again. Jake had once again accused me of not liking the job and not treating clients well. It was frustrating, and I decided to just let it go. Sometimes, people who do wrong things seem to get away with it. But I learned an important life lesson from all of this. Not only was my friend Jake acting badly, but it was also clear that my boss was not very fair. It felt like Jake was pulling the strings behind the scenes, making the boss do things he shouldn't have. By the way, if you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below so you never miss any of my daily videos. Each video has awesome stories just like this one. Once upon a time, I had a job interview, and they asked me about my greatest accomplishment. This question made me think back to my career, and I remembered something special. You see, I'm a team builder, and this story goes back a few years. I started working on a unit where I was already experienced, but most of the staff there were quite young and new to the job. For many of them, it was their very first real job, and they thought all the strange things happening every day were normal for a workplace. Our nurse manager was named Dorian, the program manager was Kip, and the clinical director was Dr. Steve. Yes, I had 3 bosses. It was quite a unique situation. Now, the workplace had some strange rules. Dorian had decided that no one was allowed to write incident reports for medication errors or safety issues. Why, you ask? Well, he thought it made him look bad in the safety meetings. It was a bit puzzling, to be honest. Even the non-clinical staff members were allowed to pass medications and make schedule changes without any notice. This made things even more confusing and a bit chaotic. But here's the kicker. This place was like no other I had ever worked in before. It was the most toxic environment I had ever seen. There were various cliques within the staff, and they were constantly at odds with each other. It was like being in the middle of a never-ending battle. One day, I checked my email, and there was a message from Dorian. He said something that made my heart race. He told me that I was being investigated for an incident that happened on the unit. The strange part was that he didn't give me any details. No date, no medical record number, nothing to tell me what this incident was about. Naturally, I replied and asked for more information. I explained that I would need the details and that I wanted to speak with my union representative. I also mentioned that I would be available to meet at a time that was convenient for me. But Dorian declined to provide any information, and he insisted on a meeting. From that point on, I started receiving emails from Dorian almost every day. They became increasingly threatening, and it made me very uneasy. I printed all of those emails, and I even reached out to my sister, who was an employment attorney. I was determined to get to the bottom of this, but I was also starting to feel the pressure. You see, I realized that Dorian was using intimidation tactics, and he was quite effective at it. Even though I knew what he was doing, it still made me anxious every time I checked my email. It's funny how intimidation can work on people, even when they know it's happening. As time went on, I began discussing the situation with some of my coworkers in the break room. Before I knew it, I was approached by 3 other women who had all received the same mysterious email on the same day. We were all in the same boat. We decided to call our union representative and stand together. We refused to meet with HR until we had more information. Dorian didn't like that one bit. He continued to escalate the situation. He even confronted us in the hallway, coming close and trying to stare us down. It was quite an uncomfortable experience. Our tale begins with a neighbor across the street who had openly expressed anti-LGBTQ+ views to others in the neighborhood. One day, while I was cleaning my yard, this neighbor decided to make a comment about how the previous owner had kept the lawn in perfect condition. But then, the conversation took an unexpected turn. He mentioned the owner before that, who had kept the yard a mess and flew so many flags. You know what he was implying, right? He was talking about a gay man who had lived there for 30 years and proudly displayed his pride flags. But the story doesn't end there. A few months later, this neighbor openly shared his prejudiced views, saying that trans people weirded him out. What he didn't know was that the parent of their child's best friend was trans. Isn't that interesting? So, in response to this intolerance, I decided to take action. I asked my partner to hang a large Progress Pride flag on our fence, facing our neighbor's house. This beautiful flag represents love and acceptance for all, no matter who they are or who they love. But that's not all. I also bought a yard sign featuring the trans flag with a powerful message: "Hate has no home here." We placed this sign so that it faced our neighbor's house directly. We wanted to send a clear message that love and acceptance always triumph over hatred and discrimination. Now, what's essential to remember, children, is that it's crucial to stand up against prejudice and promote kindness and inclusion. We can all make a difference by spreading love and acceptance in our communities. And so ends our tale of taking a stand against intolerance. Remember, kids, even small actions can make a big difference in the world. So there you have it, the stories with intriguing twists and turns. Each one teaches us something different. Whether it's standing up for what's right, dealing with strange situations, facing challenges with friends, or handling intimidation, life is full of lessons. And remember, no matter what happens, staying strong and doing the right thing is always important.